You are going to put the you are going to record the screen, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Can you hear me? Like, are you still good with my audio?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay. Because I'm directly talking to the system, but not in the earphone, so that's why I want to check with you.
Let me open that PPT. Give me a minute.
No problem. So the JD that they have sent, right? Like it looks like it is on premises, right? Not a cloud or something like that. Looks like.
all right. So
So my friend, like, the question was like, based on the JD that share, right? Like, this is on premises only. They have not mentioned about any cloud side, right? The JD they were talking about.
no, so they have said the AWS required, and see there's a very before we jump from the on-premise and AWS or the Azure, we will see. I mean, what essentially is the DevOps.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's not talk because cloud and on-premise has a difference between you maintaining it and going serverless.
Okay.
AWS or the Azure is maintaining all the infrastructure behind. So for example, let's say the difference which comes when we talk about on-premise and Azure. So on-premise, you have to get the VM. You have to install the Kubernetes on all the VMs like K8 service. You have to run your kubelets. You have to manage everything, right? You have to install on all the machine, connect them. The services are connected. The Kubernetes masters is running, and then you have a Kubernetes cluster. But this all exercise, what you have done, you can simply by click, you can spawn your Kubernetes cluster on the Azure. So the manageability becomes easy with the cloud. But engineering, you have to understand that what goes behind. So if you are doing something on premise, you have the manageability on your hand. You have to take care of the all non-functional requirements, most of the non-functional requirements. How long it will be up, how it will be running, if it goes down, who will take care of it? If few machine goes down, what will happen? If all of them goes down, what will happen? All these questions is what you are handling. But if you're putting your stuff on the cloud, they are ensuring it, right? So that's the only difference. So I'm not talking about on-premise or AWS. We will see all those flavors in this lesson, but yeah. So just all right. So now, before I switch to the slide, I would set one expectation that DevOps is like you are operationalizing your development work, right? Essentially. So how you can operationalize a development work? Where it starts? It starts with somebody's vision, right? Like I thought of developing a mobile app which can track or which can which can set it in the context which can track the COVID patient. Okay, so I have the vision, right? So I have a very blurred vision that I want to develop a mobile app which can track the COVID patient. It would have all the details and it will know that in my surrounding areas how many COVID patients and etc. are there. Some of the relevant information.
Correct.
I only had this, right? And then I have the money. So I am I own this product, right? I am the owner now.
Correct.
So I will hire. I will get a technical owner for this, who can technically own this. Like, who can ask me the question: you want the iOS app, Android app? You want to track till I mean, you are tracking COVID, so I don't necessarily track for 10,000 kilometer, right? Or 100 kilometers. Even if they are patient in the 100 kilometers, that's not my that's not harming me.
Correct.
All these technical questions, who can create that backlog? So there should be someone who would so I'll become the product manager, and there would be someone who will be owning these backlogs. Backlog, we are saying the fundamentals. So I will move to the slides, because so that it will set the picture that now we have seen the vision, right? Vision is the fundamental. Somebody in the organization has come up with a vision that I want this. That not always necessarily a product, a new product. It could be the enhancement in the existing product. It could be the modification or the new version or new release of the existing product. It could be anything. But you have a vision. A particular person has the vision.
Correct. Yes.
So then the game starts. So we start creating the backlog. Like we call it product backlog, because to develop a product, these things has to be implemented. Then only we can get the product.
Correct.
Okay. So the backlog owner or the product owner will start writing down all the hard lines backlog. Like we need for next 6 months, we just need the iOS app, or we just need the Android app, or let's say for in the next 3 months. We are going with the MVP, minimum viable product, with the limited set of users. So we just need the Android app. We need to track only 5 kilometer of radius. We need to we need some ID integration, basic ID integration, and we need some health ID integration, so that we can identify that this person has been diagnosed or not.
So these are all the prerequisites or the requirements.
Right. So these are the backlog preparation. Somebody has to create the backlog, product backlog. With that product backlog, the team comes to the Scrum. Team comes to the particular Scrum team. That, see, I have this product backlog, and we need to estimate it. And I have all the, so when you create the backlog, right now, I'll just tell you the definition of ready is a keyword for every backlog you have created, that your backlog is ready or not to be given to the Scrum team. Let's say if it's missing something. So every organization should have the definition of ready defined. Definition of ready and definition of done. So definition of ready means the backlog which you have created has all the mandatory criteria fulfilled. And when I will implement it, then I will ensure that all the definition of done is met. Okay. So these are the important from the interview perspective. Because if you talk about all these practice happening within the organization, it resonates well. So backlog is coming to the Scrum team with a definition of ready, that okay, I have met all the definition of ready. Now it's ready to be given to the Scrum team. The Scrum team will do the sprint planning based on the capacity. Like I have 10 members in my team, and let's say 8 hours a day. So 80 hours a day and 5 days a week. So 400 hours I have. Right. Every week I have the 400 hours.
Okay.
Based on that capacity, I mean, you will manage your holiday, you will manage the leaves, you will deduct all those hours, and you finally create a capacity. And then you will plan that what story can be taken initially. I mean, it's not like you can pick up the demo part first. right? You cannot pick the demo part. So you have to first create the basic screen, the first screen. So you will start with the first screen where the login functionality is being done. So you will start with the login. So in the first sprint, you will pick all the login related user features. All right. So now understand how the hierarchy goes. So if I will say DevOps. So initially, what was their product and its vision, right?
Correct.
We had the product and its vision. So then we created the backlog. Yeah, and we ensured that definition of ready is done.
And okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So we created the product backlog. Now, essentially, product backlog has what? So somebody
requirements. Yeah.
It's a collection of somebody calls it requirement. But in DevOps practice, we call it either epic or we call it feature.
Epic, okay.
Okay. So the person who was the product owner now will create all the features. Like in the product login is a feature, seeing the details is a feature, setting up the database is a feature or something required as a backend, etc., etc. So he creates either epic or the feature.
Okay.
Requirement could be even the vision. You have the vision, so that's a requirement. Requirement is a very broader term, but we are talking about from the DevOps perspective, what's happening in this Scrum. Scrum or lean practice or any you will heard the safe agile as well. But all these things, they are the same. It's just the practice is a little bit different, but essentially they talks about the same thing. So, all right. So now you have
you say DevOps. We cannot. The DevOps is a kind of the multiple practices involved, right? Like it's not a one. DevOps is not a single entity, or it's a very generic word, like where we follow like any type of practices to achieve whatever like to develop or fulfill the product. Correct.
Okay. No. So remember that definition. DevOps, dev operationalization. You are operationalizing the dev effort. In development, in developing something, what all happens? You develop something, you test that, you put it, you release that. So dev, test, release. There are three essential things, right?
Yeah.
So dev, test, and release. How these three things works with minimum intervention, manual intervention. If we will have the minimal manual intervention, then we would be saving the cost and we would be operationalizing the thing which is fast, right? So we will have the faster deliveries. So there's two motto behind it. One is the cost. Second is the delivery, which happens very fast. I mean, you don't have to wait for the QA. I mean, QA, the moment QA gets the sign off, the pull request gets approved, your things will be pushed to the production branch and then it gets deployed. So things becomes very, very automated. Fast. Yeah. So you get the faster deliveries.
Yeah.
Just imagine that, like the Apple and everyone, they release their bug fixes every now and then, right? They send you they are doing this on a massive scale. So if they will do manually, it would be very cumbersome. Somebody will get the release, somebody might not get it, or some there could be any sort of problem.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So it's a massive challenge which the organization is facing. So that's why they come up with the tools. Rather, now they have come up with the very sophisticated tools which achieves this, and then they don't take that manual pain. So why I'm saying this is the first principle. This is the first pillar of the DevOps, where we talk about the product vision, which we're calling running a sprint. Running a sprint is the first step, because there you have the requirement, there you have the stories, there you have the task which developers are working, and from there the rest of the cycle starts. So you have the epic. So in you do the sprint planning. In the sprint planning, you break these epics into the user stories. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So like login functionalities. Login includes authentication, authorization. Authentication includes SSO, or could be login includes OAuth based authentication, or login includes the Facebook or Google based authentication, third party authentication, or your sign up or registration. You can sign up or register, or your SSO, or there are a couple of 4-5 ways of authenticating a user. I'm just talking about the login functionality. Then once the user authenticated, you have to authorize him, what he can see and what he can't see. Is he an admin or is he just a user? Right. So even for the small epic, even for one epic, essentially there could be 4-5 stories can be created.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Then for every user stories, the task gets created, right? On which the developer will work. So how this work mostly in the what we do, we sit with the team, we do the planning poker, we call it planning poker, that everybody will rate that story, what story point they want to give, and then based on so have you done planning poker and etc.?
No, I don't know. No, I have not done that.
All right, so in that case, remember these words. Okay. So planning poker is a technique of estimation. Estimation, how it happens, we give the story points to the user. To the stories, user stories, right? And the story points.
When we say estimation, in the sense, for instance, like when we create the task for each user story, so user stories means whatever the actual functionality or whatever the module that they are going to develop, right? Like every modules or any functionality they are going to develop for the product, that will be considered as a task. So every task that will have its own estimation. Is that the right my understanding, or?
So see, the user stories. I'm just breaking this down for the simplicity. The user stories will have the story point, because user story is also not a implementable task. It's still a view. The developer has agreed that okay, this might take some 1 week of effort, or 1.5 week of effort, or maybe 2 days or 3 days, something like that, right? But he doesn't know exactly. So this is never exact. This is approximation on the user stories. User stories estimation goes with the Fibonacci. You see, this is the Fibonacci series. So I will ask every team member that this is the user story, the login functionality. So what do you see, how complex this is, and how long, based on our experience, how long it will take? Some people will say 3, some people will say 5, someone say 8, and etc. So it's a pure polling condition. If let's say if most of the people have said 8, you can go ahead with the 8. But let's say if there is a tie or something, you can ask the team that what you are manually agreeing with. Why do you think? If somebody, let's say, has said just 1, so you can ask him. Why are you so confident that you can implement this in 1 day? If yes, then maybe this story can be assigned to him. Because he might know this very well. Or if somebody is saying 13, then you will again have to ask that is there some complexity which I don't know and this guy knows about it. That last time we have seen that implementing the login functionality took that long. So we should not ignore either. Whether you have to consider it with everyone and see. So normally what happens, zero is not a, we don't take 0.
Consider, yeah. Okay.
One is approximately 1 day. 2 is approximately 2 days. 3 is like 1 week. 5 is like 1.5 week, and 8 is like 2 weeks. Okay, so that's how a bare understanding what we have in our mind.
Okay.
Rather, it's not a bare understanding. It's a set. I'll open this Fibonacci representation. So see, normally if you are rating 1, that means 1 ideal day. 2 means 2 to 3. 3 means 1 week. 5 means 1.5 week. 8 means 2 weeks. Right? That's what our understanding.
Okay.
So let's say we can use the Fibonacci series, or we can what we can do the t-shirt sizing as well. T-shirt sizing. So that is also the same thing. Like how we have the t-shirts. It's like extra small, medium, large, XL, and double XL.
Yeah.
So if some story is excess, we will say it's like it's 1 day or something, or 2 days or something. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
So these are the common practice in which we estimate the user story. Then then the thing comes to the task. Now the developer has to create the. So we have done the estimation. User stories are now assigned to the developers. That some I will ask that who would like to own this story. If nobody will try to own, maybe I'll assign it. But I will first check with the team who is comfortable to own this story, like login functionality or authentication authorization. Who is comfortable in owning it? So the user stories has been now assigned to the developers, so they can create their task. Like for authentication, they need 10 hours to write the code, or do the integration with OAuth, or implement the SSO. So they will create 4 or 5 tasks. Then they will test it. They will do the functional testing. They will do the unit testing. They will do etc. 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 So they will create tasks and they will give the hours to it. So they will say, I will take 8 hours to write the code. I will take 5 hours to unit test it. In this way, we get the complete breakdown of the vision, right? And we have all the story. We have all the stories with some IDs, right? So this ID we have picked up in this sprint, and we are running it. So from there, the game starts. Now you have the user stories and the sprint planning done. Your sprint board is set up. Sprint board is done. So now where it comes? So let's say X number of task has been completed.
Okay.
Yeah. So X task has been completed. That means X code has been checked in, has been tested and checked into the Git or some repository, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So that's how we consider that X task has been completed. You are writing some code, you are doing the unit testing. So after finishing that unit test, you have committed that code to the Git. So when you will commit the code to the Git, it comes the second step, which is being called the repository, code repository. It could be Git, it could be Bitbucket, it could be any CVS, it could be Azure repos.
SVN or something. SVN also, right? Like
yes, it could be SVN. So that's the second step. So when you so what you do when you commit the code or push the code to Git, you raise a pull request so that somebody can do the code review. Then he approves. Once your code is approved, it gets committed to the Git. Git commit happens. Okay. So now your code is available in the Git. It is a write code. It's not breaking any other functionality. So we have agreed. Your pull. That's why you have raised a pull request. Okay.
Okay.
Understand these points as well. This is a very important steps these days. If you are saying without a pull request, code gets approved, code review is not happening in your organization, so that's not a right practice.
Okay.
Okay. So every code has to be reviewed by either one or two reviewer.
Oh, okay. So the pull request is basically for the person who is going to review the code, correct?
Yes. So
Okay.
when I will commit my code to the Git, automated email will goes to the pull request approver. That somebody has raised a pull request for you. Please review this and approve it. Or if you don't find it good, then you can give the comments and he will implement it and raise the another pull request.
Okay.
Okay. So this cycle goes. If it gets denied, then developer will fix the code, raise another pull request, which will be reviewed, and yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
So finally, this commit has come against that task ID, the task ID which you have completed.
Okay, okay.
So this is how we are tracking in the DevOps, that how many tasks we have achieved, how many user stories we have achieved, how many epic has been completed, where are we in this product vision? Are we will be able to achieve this on time or we won't? Right. So if somebody, if the higher management VP or director comes to review the product, he won't go to the developer and ask everything. He will just come to the Scrum Master, or he'll just come to the product owner and ask to show me the dashboard. I mean, where are you? You had 100 product. You had 100 epics. You have completed 5 of them, or let's say 20% of them. So 80% is pending. So if for 20% you have taken 3 months, the rest of the 80% you might take 9 months. Right. So I get a clear vision. Hello. You are here with me? Hello.
Oh.
Yes, hi.
No, so line got disconnected. Is there something wrong in my side? I don't know.
All right. Anyways, now it's better. Let's continue. So okay, sure. I will start sharing. Cause. All right. So you got till this point, right? Raising the pull request and code repository.
One question. So when this been approved, right, and when this approved and committed to the Git, right? So this will be integrated to the task that is open for this task. I mean, for this activity, or the developer who trying to push the code, right?
Yes.
So is it how it works?
Yes, that's a best practice, because see, when I'm committing to the Git, my name goes in the GitHub, right? You can see that who has developed this code.
Correct.
I have developed this code. There is one practice, like I'll say that the development complete. I'll just write some ABC comment, which is not making any sense. I would never know that what was this task, why you have done this. So it's better that if you can put that task ID or user story ID, attach the user story ID in the comment. Then whosoever, let's say after a year, after 2 months, if he is going through that implementation, He can go to the sprint board and see what was the requirement given to you and why you have done this way.
Oh, okay.
Right. So that's why it's important that in the commit message, in the commit comment, when you're committing code to the Git, you put the message or you put the comment like you have worked on this user story and this changes I have done against this user story in the Jira or in the Rally or in the Azure DevOps or any other platform, right? Where you are managing your sprint board.
Okay. I got it. Oh yeah,
Correct.
got it.
Yeah. So that's why it's important. So now your code has come to the Git.
Correct.
So ideally, what should happen? Your functionality was individual, right? So your every sprint runs. It runs how? It runs in a few frequencies: 7 days, 14 days, or 21 days frequencies. So every 21 days, your team delivers a feature or more than a feature or more than an epic. So let's say in this sprint, you have picked up 4 epics, 4 user stories. So 4 user stories will become one feature.
Okay.
Right. So let's say in this sprint, we have picked up the authentication and authorization. So once the authentication development and authorization development has been all done, then you have a release candidate, right?
Correct. Okay.
So that you can release candidate is like you have implemented a feature. Okay. So now what you will do? You will do the cherry picking. These are the terms. I'm just mentioning it because if by chance it comes to your mind, then just say that no, we are doing it. Maybe somebody else had been doing this in the team. We have the guy who is managing the.
Correct. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, cherry picking. I heard of it because I usually, this is what my understanding. Like for instance, as you said, like authorization, authentications are one other feature that we have developed. But the business needs only the authorization part to go, like not all of them. So they will go for the cherry picking, only the specific feature only they want to push it, not all of them.
Yes.
So that is a cherry picking, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So you're right. So you do the cherry picking, and then your release candidate is ready for the to be done. Okay. So now comes two things. Now the DevOps take their way, but the manageability takes. I'll say in the code repository. Or before you had the code, this commit, the final Git happen, you had couple of more cycles. So I will from here, ideally it's a split. One is inclusive, one is the next step. Inclusive is like your test plan. How is your test plan going on? Are you maintaining all the test cases? Are you maintaining all the test cases? Where are you executing it? And all those things for the release candidate, which is required. Like if it needs a performance test, if it needs stress testing, black box testing. There are multiple ways of integration testing. Like you have integrated SSO, right? So integration testing has to be done. So what was your test plan for this task? Are those all done? If yes, then again you are ready. So that was your test plan. Now your test plan is ready. Then you will come to the CI/CD part. Okay. Now essentially a development has been done. Now you have to ensure the continuity to it. So continuous integration and continuous deployment is needed now. So it is what it is: continuous integration, continuous deployment. Deployment as in sense that you have the environment as well, right? So the
Correct,
things
correct.
should go to the right environment. Right now, you're just pushing it to the QA. So you don't need, uh, so there would be pipeline for the QA, there would be the pipeline for the QA, there would be pipeline for the dev to QA, there will be pipeline for the QA to production.
Correct, correct. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So how essence and how normally this pipeline looks like. So you have the things in the, so you have the sprint user stories, which was committed to the Git. So on the Git, you had the Jenkins running, Jenkins or GoCD. GoCD is another version of it. And Jenkins, what Jenkins was doing, Jenkins was polling your branch for the every new commit. Whenever the new commit comes to the Git, what Jenkins does, it does the build.
Okay, so I have a question over here. Probably let's complete this, then I'll show.
Yeah, sure. So that's what. That's why I'll just complete this pipeline and then we'll talk about it. So Jenkins, what Jenkins will do, Jenkins will do the build. It will get all the source code from your GitHub. It will fetch all the artifacts from the Nexus, and it will do a build, and then it will push your build to the Nexus repository. Okay. So Nexus is not the next. Nexus is along with Jenkins. So Jenkins has done the build, and your jar file or your DLL file or whatever the build file you have has been pushed to the Nexus repository. Now from the Nexus, or let's say if you have done a Docker build. So okay, let's not confuse. Just Nexus is your jar or DLL repository.
Is it something the workspace? Is it something like the workspace?
So we'll see that it's not like works, but it's a repository, like where you put the there is a Git is like a code repository, right? You only put the source code, binary code.
Correct.
But Nexus is like where you put the byte codes, which is needed, which is runnable files.
So which is the final version that will be deployed into the environment, isn't it?
And then sorry to cut you off, but see, on the Nexus, Nexus you keep the bytecode. I said it in a very high level perspective, but what do you mean by so? Let's say when you are doing a build, why I said Jenkins along with Nexus. Jenkins is doing the build. So let's say you have written the code of authentication. It would, and in the Java, then you will need some OAuth libraries, OAuth jars, right? You need some, you need, let's say you are needing 10 jars, or you have written a normal Java job, which is working against my MS SQL Server or Oracle database. So it would need the Oracle jar, it will need the MS SQL jar, right? So let's say you have 10 developers. Every developers are working on the same piece of code. So let's say I have joined now and I have downloaded my version of it. Let's say the MySQL, MS SQL Server latest version is something else. I'm using that. You are using some old version. So what will happen? When I will commit my code, it will break the complete functionality, right? Because I've used the latest version. I've used some function which is not available everywhere. So we need to centralize all these jars, which is a common usage for all the developers. Right.
Okay.
So you have to achieve the commonality during the build. Let's not have the jar conflict that I have used version 1, you have used version 2. Like in Python, when you what happens? Somebody has used Python 2.7, you have used Python 3. That's a broader aspect, but let's say you have used some other in the Python, you have used different version of pandas and I have used different version of pandas. Okay. Similarly, in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Java, let's say I'm working with the CSV file and I have used some other library, you have used some other library. So it will when we'll merge the code, it will break the functionality. So what we do, we ensure that we have all the jars on the Nexus, and developers are not downloading any jar from the Maven or the open source or from the Google. Our development team is only using the jar which is available on the Nexus. So Nexus has two importance.
Okay.
One is like all the developers would be using the common jar, common functionality. So when we'll be doing the merge, the code merge, the functionality will not break because of the jar config. Okay,
Correct.
that's
Yeah.
one. And the second is, let's say somebody has used it's an open source world, right? So there could be some jar which is built by, let's say, China or Russia, or somebody is trying to hack the code, or somebody is trying to put the malicious code in it and do something. How would you know? Just to achieve the functionality, you have used some jar which is not approved by your CTO or your organization. I mean, I don't think that you should use some ABCD jar, because ABCD jar has some problem, and we just use the Apache jar.
Correct.
Right. So that's the restriction. How will you enforce in the organization? Only through the Nexus.
Okay.
So you will restrict the developers to use the comfortable jars in the sense the not approved jars. If the jar or if the bytecode are not approved, you should not use it. So that restriction you can enforce through the Nexus.
Oh,
okay. So these are the common benefit of using the Nexus, and the best that's why we use Nexus.
Okay. So in the olden days, like, so for instance, like right now, in our current DMAT environment, like now in our environment, like, we are not using the Nexus, right? It's very straightforward. Like they build the jar, and that will fall into the Jenkins workspace folder somewhere, and from there we push the jar file to the respective environment. But that is not a really controlled one, right? Like as
that's not really a controlled one,
so
because
no security. There's no security in this case. It's basically for security. That's what I understood.
No. So see, there's another open source vendor as well. We call them Maven, right? So you have a Maven build.
Maybe,
So if the developers are using the Maven repository, then also you are safe, because Maven does that for you.
Oh, okay.
But if you are in a very sensitive environment like financial or healthcare domain, I mean, I will not necessarily mean the financial and then healthcare, but if you are working with the very sensitive data, and you don't want to even rely on the Maven, maybe Maven has their own policy. You want to create your own policy, right? What the developers can do or what developers can't do.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
So it's an advanced layer of ascertaining that the things are. I mean, if tomorrow, like today, you don't know if the developers are using all the jars from the Maven, or they have also downloaded some of the jar and put it in the build path. Right.
Got it.
You don't know it, whether they are shipping it along with the build. So if somebody does that, then that's a security threat.
Okay. Got it.
But that won't happen in the Nexus. You will not be able to do a build with the common build path, or if the reviewer will see that, he will not approve it, and then you might not be able to use those jar which is not approved in the list of approved jars. But anyways, that's a benefit of the Nexus.
Okay. So actually, one dumb question might be, I'm sorry. So when you say, right, like for instance, I am developer, I am developing something and I'm building the jar. Okay. So that is my customized jar. Okay, that is my customized jar that I'm going to deploy into the production environment for the product. But when we say the Nexus is the place, it's a kind of the staging environment, like where I can just, when I'm building the Jenkins, like the final version of the base or the jar file, right? That will be into the Nexus repository or somewhere. Like that Nexus is the person who qualify the jar or the data that I'm going to deploy into the production. Probably sometime I will be using some third-party jars as well. For instance, like in our case, like if we take some different plugins or different jars for a different geospatial product or something like that. That might be some valid or some there might be some not valid jars as well. So this Nexus is the guy like who qualify those jars, and he will really restrict them, or he will protect those jars is not going into the production. So I'm just, I think I don't know whether I'm right 100% that with my understanding. I'm just
No, the understanding is right. There is a difference in the implementation, how you have understood it. So what you have understood is right. Like Nexus is ensuring that, but it's not like really a guy who is doing everything for you. It's only you who are doing it. It is just a repository. Repository means you have things available there, and you have your. I mean, this is a Maven is what? Maven is an online. So see, if I will take you to the Maven. Maven repository, okay? If you go here, you can search, and you have all these jars, right? A person can use any of these jars. Like I need the date and time related jar. So I can use Zoda. I can use Zoda of any of these versions, okay? There's a complete repository of bytecode where you so see see the difference. In Git repository, you never commit the bytecode. You always commit the source code. That is a source code repository. If you want to again make a complete, I mean something like an interviewer will get it in just a one line, that what's the Nexus is all about, or do you have the idea or not? It's like Git is a source code repository. We never commit the bytecode because it has to go through the review cycle. Nexus
what is the bytecode? What is the difference between source code means we develop. Bytecode means somebody developed and it's available in some portal or something like that?
No, so source code is like what you see in this what you write.
Git that we develop.
That we write. So something like this. You have written some program.
Yeah.
So let's say you have written these codes. Okay, so this is source code.
Source code, correct.
Which you can read, but when I will compile this, it will become the bytecode jar or DLL. So if I will go here and see, if I will download this, if I will see, this is a jar, right? If I will download this and I'll try to open this anywhere, you will see that because this bytecode only the machine can understand, where you have the JVM. So Java can only understand this.
Oh, it's a compiled version. Okay, source code is a readable format. The bytecode is the compiled version of the I mean, like it's a machine language program. Okay, got it.
Right. So it's a that's why. So you have the bytecode repository as a Nexus. So you need some built-in jars. Let's say I was using Zoda when I was writing my code. I have used these many libraries, right? Like I have used NumPy, I have used Time. So Time is a library. It's a bytecode, which I'm just using it here. So when I will push this code to the production, I will need that the Time library, Python Time library, is there on the production. Then only it will run.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. I
So
got it.
what I will do, I will put that time library in the Nexus, and I will use the
Hmm.
Nexus behind the proxy. Maybe
Okay.
some of the organization, what they do, they restrict this access, maybe in the repository, so I cannot access it from the company's uh,
Oh,
firewall,
oh. Ah.
and I cannot download anything. I can only access my Nexus repository, and I can only use those jar.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Oh, then how do we manage like in those cases, like when the company restrict that flow, those kind of
So
things, right?
this the CTO or the architect
Hmm.
or the people who's in the organization, they review those jars, and then they put it in the, so somebody does that for you.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Rather directly accessing it from the Maven website, they download it and push it into the local, so they will consume from the local repository.
Yeah, so they can consume it from the local repository.
Okay, got you, got you. Okay, okay,
Got it?
okay, okay.
Clear?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Sure,
now
sure.
your
Thank you.
Jenkins build is done,
Okay.
and your jar is pushed on the Nexus. So let's say you can use over here two things. You can do the Jenkins build,
Hmm.
you can create a jar, or you can create a Docker image, right? You can do both the things here. If you are going with the containerization or Dockerized image, so your Jenkins will create the Docker image. It will not create the jar
Hmm.
file,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? This Docker
Hmm.
image will then be pushed to the what? Docker Hub. Or you
Correct,
need
correct.
something, again, you need something like Nexus,
Oh,
where you will put this Docker image. Nexus is not meant for the Docker image, right? Nexus is meant for the jar and DLL and etc.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, if your Jenkins has created the Docker image, you will need open source. You have the Docker Hub. You can push your
Hmm.
Docker image to the Docker Hub, and people can use it.
Correct,
Otherwise, you
correct.
can use the Elastic Container Service,
Mm-hmm.
ECS, Elastic Container Service, which is
Hmm. Hmm.
AWS,
Hmm.
or you can use the Azure Container Instance.
Okay, okay.
So you can put your Docker image into, so these are also like, so you, in one sense you can understand these are the Nexus now on which
Hmm.
you have your Docker image. So your Docker image is now pushed to the Azure Container Instance or Elastic Container ECS. From
Hmm.
there, so you have now ECS or Nexus,
Hmm.
your deployment release candidate, or ACI, ECI, oh sorry, ACI. So you have the things deployable candidate here, right?
Hmm.
Okay.
Right, right.
So
Yeah,
from
yeah.
this, it will go to your AKS as your Kubernetes. I mean your built-in, your in-house Kubernetes cluster.
Hmm.
So Kubernetes cluster will what? It will keep calling these locations. That new Docker image has come, so it will just put deploy it onto the different
Hmm.
pods.
Hmm. Hmm.
So understanding the Dockers and Kubernetes will certainly take a couple of more hours. It
Hmm.
needs altogether a different session, but for the time being, since we have
Yeah,
established the
sure.
pipeline,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
now I'll just take you to the image where the diagram where you can see this. Okay.
Okay, sure. Yeah,
Although
yeah, yeah.
I have the huge, I mean, it's a complete DevOps understanding, like how you can. Although these are important, so let me know. We can take another session as well.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
I
At
will.
least for now, like I wanted to really break this session right now. I mean, this technical session.
Yeah.
I mean, the guys. Yeah, that's what I
So
wanted.
see, this is how it works on the. It is a stepwise. So you have the dev is done. Your
Hmm.
build is your Jenkins or GoCD has done the build. Your
Correct.
build package is moved to the Docker image repository. So I
Hmm.
mentioned it Docker, but it can be Nexus, it can be
Nexus, Azure.
Elastic Container Service, or it could be Azure Container Instance. Okay,
Hmm.
it could be
Yeah.
anything. Second step. From
Okay.
there, your Jenkins again can deploy. So this is the CD. This was the CI. Okay,
Hmm.
continuous
Okay.
integration is done. Your Docker
Hmm.
image is created. Now the image has to be deployed.
Hmm.
So you will have the either Docker Swarm or
Hmm.
Kubernetes
Hmm.
cluster. So you will have the Docker Swarm cluster or Kubernetes cluster.
Okay. Okay.
You have two options. Docker, if you have the so for the interview perspective, I will say just go with the Azure Kubernetes services. It's very easy, and it's available for free, so anyone can use it. So why not use it? It's not costing anything, right?
Open source. Okay. Yeah.
So most of the people have now using the Azure Kubernetes cluster, because you can say one thing that we were initially doing it ourselves, but managing Kubernetes cluster is altogether a very tedious task. It's a very it's a difficult, and learning path is very high. I mean, we were facing lots of challenges to ensure the continuous deployment. So what we did, although we had the Kubernetes cluster with 3 pods and etc., we achieved it in the POC. But for the productionization, for the production, we went with the Azure Kubernetes service, because it was very inexpensive. It was not costing a lot, and then the manageability was on the Azure end. We were not managing the Azure. We were not managing the Kubernetes cluster, so our production environment becomes very stable.
Okay.
So it's an interview question. You can say it like that.
Oh, okay.
So Kubernetes, what did
moreover, the Kubernetes is the open source, right? But Azure is that we get support from the Microsoft.
Kubernetes is open source, but Kubernetes has a different flavors. Like for Hadoop, you remember, right? You have Cloudera, Hortonworks, MapR.
Correct.
Similarly, for the Kubernetes also, you have different versions. You have K8s, you have Micro8s, you have various provider. So you will never be sure which one to use, what are their commands. It's very difficult. So that's why what Azure has done, it has just wrapped up everything, that you don't need to worry about what engine I'm running behind, but I'll give you the Kubernetes cluster. You can run your kubelet commands. So when you have the Kubernetes cluster, ideally, oh, my PC goes down just a minute.
Okay. Are you good to continue, right?
See, once your Kubernetes cluster is up, you only have to run these kubectl commands. Kubectl means that your cluster is up. You are not Kubernetes operationalized. Kops command, you can get rid of kops command. You just run all these commands. Okay. Kubectl command, you can remember. We can see the Kubernetes in detail.
Sure. Yeah, but because I am very, the baby step, like I don't want to take too much.
So right now, let's take the baby step. What now is what important now to understand is that your Kubernetes will keep polling your Nexus or the Docker image repository to the Jenkins, and Jenkins and using the Jenkins configuration environment, it will run all the YAML file, and the image will be pushed to the Kubernetes pods, and it will run. Okay. So your deployment is done.
Okay.
Kubernetes will ensure that how your thing gets deployed with ensuring the minimum downtime. Okay, your image has been pushed. So it will keep running your image in the background, and then it will just flip. That once your Docker image is up, as long as it's not up, you are seeing the old version of it, but it takes few seconds in the background. It brings up your pod and then just flip the redirect the content to the new development what you have done. Okay, so you will start seeing on the browser. You will not see that the IP is not available or server not available or downtime. So you will not see any downtime.
Okay.
So Kubernetes will ensure that you don't see the downtime.
Okay. It's seamlessly done. It will be done.
Yeah, it's seamlessly done by the Docker master.
Okay.
Sorry, actually, Kubernetes master.
Okay, so so this is like once, for instance, like the same continuous. Sorry, if you have something else to discuss, like probably I can ask these questions like later as well.
No. So, you can go ahead. It's important that now, because see, this is the Azure version of it, but essentially this is important. Okay. These provisioning platform, you can have it from AWS or from the Azure.
Yeah.
The only difference is the Azure has now, the advantage Azure has is the Azure gives you the Azure Kubernetes cluster. You one click and your cluster is up and running, which was a pain earlier. So Azure production cluster, this blue box what you are seeing is something which is very fabulous.
Oh, okay.
So that's the only difference. Rest everything is the same. So yeah, coming to your question, yeah, go ahead.
No, actually, there are a couple of things I have understood, right? So, in the current setup, for instance, like, okay, if the interviewer in the interview side of it, right, like, okay, they are going to ask me, okay, so I don't want to go any Dockers or no Kubernetes, no AWS or Azure. I really wanted to do this CI/CD in the legacy model, or just I don't have anything else. Kubernetes, nothing actually. I am fine with going take some time, some break or some window, specific window. I want to do this continuous integration without any cloud technology or ECS or Azure or nothing. So how can I do that? Manually, is there a way like we can? One thing, like this question comes, right? I personally did some study. Okay, so in the some YouTube video, right? Like they are doing some continuous integrations on the deployment. They have I done also with the AWS instance of free tier architecture. So whenever the code is checked into the Git, right? Like there is options called hook or something, right? There is a hook options we have in the Git model. That hook like will push the it will trigger the Jenkins every time the job will be running, and even every time when that runs, like it will go to the Git and will see any commit happened regardless of the time, then that will be pushed to the server, and Jenkins will do the build and do the deployment in the AWS tier. Forget about the the destination, AWS or something. But I have done this.
So you're seeing my screen?
Yeah, I am seeing the screen. Yeah.
Okay, so see, I have changed this. I've got your point. So see, the core model, how it works. So now we'll come to this point. Okay, till this point, everything is clear, right? It works in the legacy model. Yeah, you have the build. You have done the build. You have created a jar. That jar was pushed to the Nexus. Okay.
Correct.
Or let's say you have created a zip file, or let's say you have created some war file. You have your project can create any kind of file, right? Zip file or jar file or war file or a normal Python scripts, anything.
Correct.
So now you have to send this to the production. So what will happen? Jenkins will come in the picture. This time Jenkins will do the CD, continuous deployment. So you have to write a script.
Correct.
What script you will write? You will write a script that the first step is wget this jar from Nexus. So first step is like when you have done the build on the Nexus, let's say HTTPS localhost. I'm just putting localhost, but it's an IP, right? Your Nexus is running as 1990, and then you have created a jar abcd.jar. That was your build project. Okay. So now what you will do in your script? You will write wget this jar. After this jar is downloaded, maybe you want to copy it to CD to some other location. Yeah, or copy it or move it to some other location. You write couple of steps: copy, CD, run, or etc. etc. Okay. So this jar you have downloaded to, you will download this to a normal location, staging location. Then you will move it to the, let's say this is a jar which is for the Tomcat. Okay, this is a war which is for the Tomcat. So you will push it in the Tomcat deploy folder. Okay, so you have to do the Tomcat. You have to move it to the Tomcat deploy folder. But before you move it to the deploy folder, you will have to stop the Tomcat service, right? Stop Tomcat service.
Correct.
You will stop the Tomcat service. You will move your jar to the deploy folder. Then you will do the delete. You will remove the existing jar, right? Then you will change the location to the bin. You will go to the bin. Then you will run Tomcat service. Start Tomcat service. So this is your jar. This is your script now for the continuous deployment. So what Jenkins will do? Jenkins will run this script one by one, and your deployment is done. So what happened? For some time, if you had 5 instances of Tomcat, okay, load balancing, if you have done the load balancing for the Tomcat, it will one by one, it will do on all the machine, and it will disconnect from the load balancer, and then when it's all the machines are deployed, then it will connect back. So you can achieve again the same fault tolerance. That you will not see the downtime. But you have to ensure that after this you will have to write that before this before stopping this Tomcat service, you have to disconnect from load balancer, so that the existing load can only go to the
active servers.
Okay, so you disconnect from the load balancer. Once you will start you will still not connect, right? You will connect only after it's installed on all the instances.
Correct.
Once this script has run on all the instances, then you will connect to the load balancer, and your service will see the continuity. Similarly, if it's a Spark job, you will put it in the Spark cluster. If it's a Hadoop MapReduce, you will put in the MapReduce. If it's a simple script, you will put it on the Nginx server, and this script will be triggered by the Jenkins, and your automated deployment is done. Continuous deployment is done. So it's very simple.
Yeah.
But so this process is what you write in the Kubernetes YAML file.
Oh, okay. This is what we have in the Kubernetes as well?
Yeah. And then then when you will disconnect and when will you connect with the load balancer is what taken care by the Kubernetes. So that's the only thing you have to understand.
Okay, so this is okay. So only one thing, like here, whatever I was talking about, that I did it on my own, right? Like I was practicing. So the hook concept from the Git, right? That is needed, right? That is needed here.
That is needed here.
Okay. So
this you can call it. I am calling it a script. You can call it as a hook.
Oh, okay. No, actually, there is when I go to the Git, right? Like after going to the that particular the repository in the GitLab, there is a option there I can go and select the hook.
Let me see what you are saying. Get hooks. Yeah, you are saying this. It's a script, right? put it in a subdirectory and you get.
No,
So
actually, something I know. Something I I did it. I remember like there is a flag actually. I just go and select. I just went there and I just chosen an
no, this
option.
is still okay. So this hook you are saying is still not not in the process of it saying. Uh, it will reinitiate. I mean, it will do the pre-commit or pre-prepare the commit and etc. So like
Probably I can.
some sort of.
No, probably I can share the screenshot sometime. Like I will go to that part and I will share you the screen later. Like
Yeah,
I'll send
yeah.
you the email or something like
Do
that.
that. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll see this because it's more towards the workflow, but it's a workflow of uh, still the bytes source code side.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So
Okay.
remember, Git
Okay.
is always meant for the source code.
Ah.
If let's say somebody has done the wrong commit and your entire source code is broken, so your pipeline will break, right? Jenkins will start
Correct.
failing. If Jenkins
Correct.
will fail, the other guys will fail. So how
Correct.
will you stop that? So
Mm.
maybe you can have some hook which can restore or go take you back to the previous checkpoint from where your system was running good.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So it's like
Okay.
a rebasing mechanism and
Mm.
ensuring the workflow. That's the good Git hook. Git hook.
Oh.
See, in the integration process, Git is very important because your source code is compiling. You are doing the build
Mm.
in the
But
continuous integration. But in continuous deployment, your
mm,
bytecode is ready and you are pushing the bytecode to the server
mm,
or your
mm,
Hadoop cluster or Spark cluster or uh, some uh, server, some sort of cluster. So when
mm.
you are deploying it, your bytecode is important. So Git will never have any hook or it will not make any difference.
Okay. But here, right, like the second that core model, right, like the hook concept, like that is really the controlled fashion of the continuous integration, the development deployment? Because see, this is what I tested from my side, and I practice when I practice. So I just do some changes in the index.html. When I did the index.html, then I save it. As soon as I save it, I do the git commit and the push and everything, right? After that, right, like my Jenkins job, keep checking with a git whether the git, the repository or the code, the source code has any changes in it. As soon as it feels that some change recently happened, then he started building it and do the deployment. But
Mm-hmm.
that is I felt personally like it is not really the controlled fashion of the continuous integration development. Because so for me, if I, as you said, like some developer, like by mistake also they do some changes and they commit it, right? Then as soon as they commit it, and then this Jenkins will take the code and build it and they do the deployment. So there is no control, right here.
So control is through the hook, right? Through the workflow.
No, but that's what, like this is what I have seen. Probably am I
So
giving the
and the biggest control is say the pull request. See, if everybody you have a branch which is a release candidate, okay, which is being pulled by the Jenkins. So let's say you have a understand this. You in your Git you have what master branch. Master branch is production replica, okay.
yeah,
What is running on your production? Then you have a dev branch
correct.
on which the developers are working. But again, you have the enhancement related branches like release 1, release 1.1
Okay.
or release 2, right? So somebody is
So
working on release 2, okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
before he comes from, so you have a pull request mechanism on the release dev branch. So before he push anything to the dev branch, master branch things will be pushed only from the dev once the things are available in the dev. So from the release, it will be approved and go to the dev. From dev, it will be approved and then go to the master. So it's not like somebody can directly push to the master. and your production cycle will break, or somebody can directly push into the dev.
No, actually, right, like this is how it is following. Okay, before stepping into that conversation, right, what I was referring here is probably I can share my screen. Actually, this is what I was, okay, can I share my screen, or I think I'm not able to
Yes, you can share.
Okay. Okay. Post disable the participant screen sharing. That's what I am getting it. Sorry. Sorry, I'm not able to share.
So I made you host now. You will be able to.
Okay. Yeah, now okay. Okay, you're seeing my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, this is something that I was practicing with the AWS, some Jenkins setup and some CI/CD integration, right? So this is what I was referring to. So in the Git, right, like this is what the webhooks. Sorry, not the who's actually. It's a webhooks. Okay. So whatever I'm doing, right, the index.html, I am doing some change in this index.html. Then I am pushing into this Git repository, my Git repository. And if I go there, right, like I am seeing there is an option called webhooks. So in these webhooks, like I am giving this URL push actually. So what's happening, like this is periodically when I have this enabled, right, like what's happening, my Jenkins job, I don't have my instance up and running right now in the AWS. I shut down it, but in that Jenkins instance, right, he keep checking this Git. As soon as he sends something like, okay, hey, some changes in the index.html, so go ahead and push it, do the build. Then what's happening, the Jenkins job builds the job, build the code, and push the code to these. He built the Dockers actually. He built the Docker image, and then he'll push it to that VM instance, and my website is up and running. Okay, with the latest changes. So
exactly,
this is what I was talking about, the webhooks. But I'm sorry about the confusion. I was talking about the hooks. This is the webhooks I was referring to. This is also, they are saying this is one of the method like CI/CD, continuous integration and the deployment. But I have seen this is something like there is no control anywhere else. Any changes, push it to the repository and make some changes. Then the Jenkins sends some change here, and with the help of the webhooks, that will be built and do the deployment at the server. Is it a really right approach that we can propose the customer, or I mean the end user, or this is not?
So see, it's a hook. Okay, so you have two questions over here. One is like the importance of this webhook. Other is why. Other is what it's doing, whether it's significant, how significant it is. So see, this same functionality, the ensuring the change has been done in the commit and everything. Jenkins does that for you. Jenkins ensures that the code has been committed, had some changes in it, and then only trigger the build. So when you set up the job in the Jenkins, it will ask you poll the branch and then poll for the changes. It's not like if with you want to do the build with every commit, or you want to do the build with the changes. Only if the change exists in the code. Okay, so that is this is already implemented in the Jenkins, but Git in itself is a platform, right? So Git can also does that for you. Let's say if you are using GoCD, or if you are using some other CI/CD, you are not using Jenkins. You are using something which doesn't understand this, whether the change has been done or not in your code.
Okay.
In that case, your webhook is important. Which can only be trigger your instance, or if there is a changes in the committed code. So anyways, this is not it's good to know, but it's good to know that we have an advanced capability in the Git.
But
it's only for the
I want to make sure whether this is really good to implement side or reality side, like whether we can use it
No, so
or
if you are using Jenkins, you'll definitely see that functionality in the Jenkins itself. Next time when you open the Jenkins, you'll see that you put that polling condition in the Jenkins, right? Poll this poll this get branch, and then when you click when you select that checkbox, it gives you three options that you want to do the build with every commit, whether it has the changes or not, or you want to do the build only if there is changes in the commit.
Okay.
I got you. Then if the build fails, what do you want to do? You want to keep trying or you want to stop it? So you'll see all those options in the Jenkins itself.
Oh, where can I see that? Okay, sorry, like is something that can be readily
Jobs config. Whenever you create a job in the Jenkins, in the configuration, you will see that.
Oh, okay. Let me also look at it. If you have some snippet, like just you can share it later.
No, so you can you can type it here. No, just open a new tab.
Oh, okay.
Or Google, or you have the Jenkins here. You click on this dashboard, no Jenkins.
Oh, okay. Right now I'm not in the VPN. I don't think that I can really.
Okay. Okay. So just go to the Google then.
Yeah.
Okay. So on Google you type Jenkins Git code polling strategy. Git polling. Yeah. Not detecting changes. Put up. Click on the images. You will see the image. Where is that? Google Images.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Oh, so anyways, it has come, but yeah. So click on this third image. Go down. He has committed. He has no. Go back. Yeah, build trigger. Yes, this image. Jenkins poll SCM issues. The second one from the left hand side. The second one, no, not this. Go left.
Sorry, which one?
Yeah, this one. Click. So it says see build jar on top. Trigger builds remotely. Build with other. No. Go on top. Okay, let me find it. I know you are. It's difficult to navigate you. Let me just.
Yeah, sure. You want to share the screen, or can I stop? Problem.
Yes, you can stop.
Thank you. Keshav, like my friend, like just to please make sure that you are not running late and or something you got because of this you should not be into some other thing. So
Yeah, I mean we'll finish after this question. So just let's take this as a.
So, but at least for my next technical discussion, whatever the discussion we had, right, that should help me for sure.
So see this image. This is where you will see that option. Let me share.
Yeah, sure.
Now you have to make me the host.
Oh, how do we do that? How do we do that? Okay. You can take the control, right? But no, should I do that?
No, I made you the host. Now click on my name and then more. Under the more you can see.
Okay. Well, let me see. You get it? Can you try now? Or
Yes, got it. So see, this is the option I was saying. Build trigger. When you see that build trigger, no. Where did that go?
You're reading
Build trigger. It says that build when a change is pushed to the get. Change is pushed. Okay. It's not like build periodically that whatever commit has happened, you are doing the build. So when and then it also says that option what you were talking about. GitHub trigger the Git SCM polling.
Okay.
So GitHub can also trigger that, and Jenkins can also do that.
Oh, okay. But
so it's a push
hook, right? The fourth option.
Yeah, so it's a push or pull mechanism.
That is for change, just a change, or entire every time, or just a change, or the fourth one.
So you decided how you have created your hook. You are pushing it only after the approval, or you are pushing it how you are pushing it. So for see, this is a pull mechanism for the Jenkins. It is pulling the changes. It is pulling the whatever you commit, and then doing that comparison that whether there is a change or not. But in the GitHub, this work is delegated to your Git. So now Git is triggering your Jenkins. Okay, you go ahead and do the build. I am ready. So it's a push mechanism. So push and pull mechanism both exist.
Okay, I got it.
So now I got the answer for your question. So if I want to give you the right answer, with the GitHub, you can achieve the push mechanism, GitHub hook. Okay, with the hook mechanism, you can achieve the push mechanism, or with the Jenkins, you can achieve the pull mechanism.
Oh, okay, got it.
So you have both the options, and it's like equally, both have the equally. Both are equally good, so there is nothing like. So I was wrong there. I mean, it's not like webhook is not famous. Webhook is also available option in the Jenkins. It was just that I never heard of it, but yeah, it looks like it's a push and pull mechanism.
Oh, okay. Sure. Okay, cool.
All right. So this summarizes our day one session. Now keep your questions ready. I have the huge list to go ahead. I mean, I have 20 plus slides, so I can walk you through the DevOps process.
Now,
Okay.
do you think that it's the right time today? I mean, today, because I don't think like it's.
No, so if you want, I can spare tomorrow as well. That's okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, tomorrow also. But only thing, right? Like my friend, like probably at least very major part. Like the CI/CD pipeline with the legacy or the core model. Right now, I'm just going to focus on, because that's what I told them. I'm having an experience with the core model, but not on the cloud or something like that. But if I get it, I can do that. That's what I said. But so based on the JD, they required like the Git and Nexus, and at least I have some really good idea about it based on the discussion and the explanation that you given by you. So I'm good with that. And only thing, the designing part, something they are talking about, the installation and configuration. I think these are all the very it's it shouldn't be that big deal, but that's a one line or two line of the discussions. Something can be done, I believe. So, do you think anything else you would like to add it of the JD that I provided?
So let's just stop recording now then.
Yeah, yeah.
Where is that?